video, I'm going to be talking about 11-3, estimating products. We'll be estimating the products of some fractions, some mixed numbers, maybe even some whole numbers as well. We're going to look at a couple different situations. The first situation is when we're estimating with mixed numbers. In this case, my tip to you is just to round. So when you have two mixed numbers, all you need to do is round both of those numbers to the nearest whole number. That makes it easy for you. Remember, an estimate is just trying to get close to the actual answer, but it should be easy for you to do. So I'm going to round both of these. 11 7/8 is closest to 12, and 4 1/3 is closest to 4. Now, it's easy because I just have two whole numbers to multiply together. 12 times 4 is 48. So with two mixed numbers, just make them into easy, close whole numbers by rounding and then multiply. Sometimes you'll be estimating with fractions. So here, I don't have mixed numbers, I just have the fraction 3/8 times a whole number, 14. So in this case, there are two things you can do. You can either change the fraction or you can change the whole number. Usually we try to just change both. Since it's estimating, you could change both numbers, but it's easier to usually just change one or the other. So I'm going to split my slide down the middle so I can show you both ways. Over here, I'll change the fraction to something easier, and over here, I'll change the whole number. If I'm changing my fraction, I want something that works well with 14. We learned that when you're multiplying a fraction by a whole number, you're going to do the whole number, which we're going to write as W, divided by the denominator times the numerator. So if my whole number is 14, I want something that I can divide 14 by. Now, 3/8 is pretty close to the benchmark fraction 1/2. So I would pick that because I can divide 14 by 2 evenly and easily multiply it by 1. 14 divided by 2 is 7 times 1 is 7. Now, could I have picked a different fraction to change it to? Yes. For example, I'm trying to think of other numbers close to the denominator I have, which is 8, that 14 can go into. I know that 14 goes into 7, so if I changed maybe 3/8 to 3/7, that'd be pretty close as well. So 14 divided by 7 times 3. 14 divided by 7 is 2, times 3 is 6. Either way would be a good choice. Now, another thing we can do is leave the fraction part the same and change the whole number. Again, I want something where my whole number is divisible by my denominator, and then I can multiply it by my numerator. I'm trying to think of a number that could go here that could be divisible by 8, but it's kind of close to 14. In this case, multiples of 8 are 8, 16, 24, so 16 would be the closest. So if I changed this whole number from 14 to 16, I could do 16 divided by 8 times 3. 16 divided by 8 is 2, times 3 is 6. Either way, I got 6, so those would both be reasonable estimates. Now, in this case, we have kind of a mix. We have a fraction times a mixed number. The other two examples that we talked about was mixed number times a mixed number, which is when we just change them to whole numbers. And then the last example had a whole number and a fraction, less than 1. But this has both. So my recommendation to you in this case would be to first just change your whole number to the nearest whole number. So 2 4/10 is in between 2 and 3, but it's a little bit closer to 2. And then from there, you can change your fraction if you need to. 1/3 is pretty close to 1/2, so I could do 1/2 times 2 because, again, I'm trying to find something where I can divide the whole number by the denominator and then multiply by that numerator. So 2 divided by 2 times 1 would be 1. I could also, with something like this, I could change that 2 to a 3, even though it's 2 4/10. Even though 2 4/10 is a little bit closer to 2, I could change it to a 3 since we're just estimating. It could be fine to make it into 3 because then I can easily do 1/3 of 3. 1/3 of 3, 3 divided by 3 is 1 times the numerator, 1 is just 1. So either way I get 1. Either way would be close. So in an instance like this, I would change your mixed number to a whole number, either round it or just pick something close like 3 so that you can either change the fraction or use the fraction that you have. So in this case, you are doing whatever's going to be easiest for you. So just to recap, we looked at 3 different examples. The first one was a mixed number times a mixed number, okay, and that would be something like 1 1/2 times 4 3/7. And all you need to do is, in that case, pick whole numbers that are close, or I just like to round both numbers. So I would round 1 1/2 to 2 times, and I would round 4 3/7 to 4, so my estimate is 8. Now, if you had picked 1 and 4 instead, that wouldn't be horribly off, but I just like to round in these cases. The next example we looked at was a fraction times a whole number, and that would be something like 3/5 times 16. Either I could change my fraction so that I can divide my whole number by my denominator. So I could say 3/5 is really close to 1/2. I could change the fraction and do 1/2 times 16 because that's easy for me. That's 8. Or I could change the whole number. I want my whole number to be divisible by my denominator, so I could change it to something like 15. So I could do 15 divided by 5, which is 3 times 3, which is 9. Either way, 8 or 9 would work. Either you change the fraction and keep the whole number, or change the whole number and keep that fraction. The last thing we looked at is when we had a fraction times a mixed number, and that would be something like 4/9 times 8 1/3. Whoops. Okay, in this case, you can change the fraction or the mixed number, probably both. You're going to have to change that mixed number because that's going to be tricky, but you could either go down to 8 or up to 9, depending on what you want to do with the fraction. If I wanted to go up to 9, I could just do 4/9 times 9. 9 divided by 9 is 1, times 4 is 4. Or if I want to go down to 8, I could change my fraction to something that works with it. 4/9 is really close to 4/8. So I could then change my fraction to 4/8, which is 1/2. Half of 8 is 4. So either way, I got the same thing. So with a fraction times a mixed number, you kind of just need to decide what is best. You do need to change that whole number to something really close. And then you may or may not need to change that fraction depending on the problem. Let's look at another example here. We have 31 times 3/5. Looking at this right off the bat, remember, with a whole number times a fraction, you either want to change the whole number or change the fraction so that your denominator and your whole number go well together. Remember, we're going to do our whole number divided by our denominator times our numerator. If my whole number is 31 and my denominator is 5, those two don't go together well. 31 is not evenly divisible by 5. But I do know that 30 is evenly divisible by 5. So I'm going to change this to 30 times 3/5. Now I have 30 divided by my denominator, 5, times my numerator, 3. 30 divided by 5 is 6, times 3 is 18. That would be a good estimate for this problem. I want you to try this one on your own. This is a little bit messy, but it should be 5 7/8 times 6 2/3. If you need to go back to the slide really quick where I talk about the 3 different types of problems and what to do, that might be a good idea. We want you to estimate this product, show your work, and bring it with you tomorrow. Good luck!